Support for Iowa Catholic Radio and Making It Personal is provided by Sarah Vocations Ministry. Learn more at joinserra.org.
Making It Personal with Bishop William Joensen on Iowa Catholic Radio and iowacatholicradio.com.
Welcome to Making It Personal with Bishop Joensen. I am Deacon Mark Campbell, in for Gene Till today. And thank you for joining us across the Iowa Catholic Radio Network and the Spirit Catholic Radio Network as we do each and every week enter into a conversation with the Bishop of the Diocese of Des Moines, Bishop William Joensen. Hello, Bishop.
Good morning, Deacon Mark. I'm already drawing from your energy. I'm not worthy to be with you, but thank you for stepping in, Jean and her husband John, on the pilgrimage with Father Dan Kirby, Father Michael Mahoney in the Eternal City, and a few other places in Italy. So wonderful for them. And maybe they'll have an encounter with the Holy Father, but here we are, and certainly alive in a week of saints and all that we're about. Wonderful chance to remember St. John Paul this past Wednesday, the one who said, "Be not afraid, do not be afraid of the truth about ourselves." And kind of that paradoxical statement that I would sometimes throw out to young people, students, and others. Love is not something that is learned, and yet there's nothing else as important to learn. And so that we just can't, obviously that life experience. And hopefully we open ourselves up to the love that is beyond all imagining, the love of Jesus Christ. So He who showed us that, and the other saints, each in their own profile, also offer that too. So yesterday was up in Dubuque, Iowa, an old haunt for me. The leaves finally turning in the Mississippi River Valley. We're a little slow around here in central Iowa, aren't we?
Yes, it's been an interesting fall. I remember an event the other night. People were complaining about how cold it was, and the visitor from out of town said, "I know Iowa, this is not cold," but I had to kind of put it into frame it up for him, saying we've had a very mild fall of 70 to 80 degree temperatures. So to have this cold wind and chill in the air it takes a little bit time still to acclimate, even as Iowans.
Well, but finally true football weather, and we're happy for that. I was up to the inauguration of President Mike Dole at Loras College, old friend of mine, and so happy to bless him, and hopefully his leadership will go well. Today, the opportunities to do so much. We're looking forward to next Tuesday, the Feast of St. Simon and Jude. Several things going on. Our people in our Spirit Catholic Radio Network are very proud of their own native son, Bishop Ralph O'Donnell, will be ordained and installed as the Bishop of Jefferson City, Missouri. So we'll be privileged to witness that event and to be with them and the brother bishops of the Midwest region and beyond. This pastor, in so many ways, a seminary rector, worked for the USCCB for clergy, consecrated life, and vocations, but certainly as pastor of St. Margaret Mary. And he helped us in our diocese to kind of, Deacon Mark, you may recall, when we had the audit of the diaconate program, and so many great strides that we've taken forward. And here we go. We're all bursting with new men interested in pursuing that vocation. So hopefully, if there are those who are listening, to get in touch with Deacon Jim Houston off of our website. What else is going on next Tuesday, Deacon Mark?
The Sarah Club of Des Moines. Of course, we thank the St. Sarah Club of Des Moines and Council Bluffs for sponsoring the show and their support of Iowa Catholic Radio. They are hosting a Holy Happy Hour at St. Mary of Nazareth Church here in Des Moines from 5:30 into the evening. They're going to have a social hour, and Father Dave Fleming he is the Vicar General for the diocese, and he will be the guest speaker, and he will speak from 6:30 to 7:30. The Sarah Club invites men and women of all ages and from any parish to join them for this great event in St. Mary of Nazareth Catholic Church here in Des Moines.
Wonderful. And it starts with a Mass, I believe, at 5:30, the greatest celebration feast, right, of all, and then moving into other reflective times. So Father Fleming is in demand. I don't know whether his ministry of healing and deliverance helps him to gain a foothold in the door, but I am so blessed to have him as kind of my alter ego as Vicar General, and so many things that he does, moving our diocese into the next phase of cultivating connections in Christ and sowing God's Spirit. Still praying for the people of Gaza, the people of the Middle East. We know that there's so much that is so fragile there, how many truces have been brokered already, and we see that violence there. But we have to be tenacious and hoping against hope, looking beyond even diplomatic interventions. I was touched by Cardinal Pizzaballa, the Latin Patriarch, as he spoke, we must not confuse hope with a political solution to the conflict that we will not see. Hope is not a slogan to shout, but a way of seeing and being in life. It cannot be separated from faith, which is its foundation. And so that narrative of what God has done in touching our earth and being among us, and so we continue our pilgrimage of hope this beautiful Jubilee year.
Well, that seems like a perfect segue into our first break. And on the other side of that, we'll speak with Father Sylvester Okoh, who is the Catholic Priest Chaplain at UnityPoint Hospitals here in Des Moines. We'll learn more about him and his ministry. This is Making It Personal with Bishop William Joensen. We'll be back right after this. Welcome back to Making It Personal with Bishop William Joensen. And on today's show, as we said going into the break, we have Father Sylvester Okoh, who is the Catholic Priest Chaplain at UnityPoint Hospitals here in Des Moines. Bishop, I'll turn it back over to you for what is going to be, I think, a very interesting conversation for our listeners today.
A joyful apostle of Christ, Father Sylvester Okoh. Those who are around him just know his smile, his radiance, but his great compassion and humility. And we are blessed in the Diocese of Des Moines. Our folks in the western Iowa part of the diocese, certainly great fondness for him. It's his time at St. Patrick's in Neola, St. Clair and Clarinda, St. Joseph in Villisca, and Sacred Heart in Bedford. But the calling that kind of brought him to us was in the healthcare ministry, and that's what he's doing about. But good to have you with us today, Father Sylvester.
Thank you, Your Excellency. Good morning.
Yeah.
Good morning to you. Good morning, Deacon Mark. It's my first time in Iowa Catholic Radio, so it's an honor to be here.
Well, your baptismal experience, we hope it'll be a good one for us. So, but you're quite the gentleman and a man of I think great integrity and all that you bring, but passionate faith for Jesus Christ. So, was this something as your native archdiocese of Calabar, Nigeria? Could you just tell us on this, making it personal, how the Holy Spirit spoke to you? What are the attraction to the priesthood?
Wow, interesting one. Well, I grew up way back in Nigeria, in the south part of Nigeria, Calabar. Just growing up like any other young person, looking forward to life, like any other person preparing for family life. And, at the age of 16, 17, when I got out of high school, that was when the call really came. And
so you did not go to high school seminary?
No, I didn't go to high school seminary. I went to a secular, high school. Mm-hmm. And my life kind of revolved around a triangle, basically for myself and my siblings. Our life was just between home, school, and church. That was the triangle we basically lived, And interestingly, our parish church was just like at most 10 minutes trek away from home. In fact, those days when the bell would toll at 6 a.m. in the morning for Angelus, at noon for Angelus prayer at 6 p.m., we could hear the bell toll from our home. And most of my friends then, even in school, were also people in my parish. So our circle was really small, same parishioners, same schoolmates and all of that. And a few lived just within the neighborhood, so we could catch up.
So with all affection, kind of a Catholic ghetto in a way?
Exactly.
Yeah, okay.
So, and most of us were also altar savers. So that brought us close to priests, to seminarians, and I think that was the connection. I just wanted to be like these people who would always come around our parish in the city area with so much joy, there to serve the people. And then Calabar, interestingly, struggled with vocations. Calabar was not, at that time, one of those dioceses that had a lot of vocations.
Is it a large metropolitan area?
Yeah, it is,
okay.
But not... the Presbyterian Church first arrived before the Catholic Church, so you can understand. Mm-hmm. Though it now has a good Catholic population, but then because of the influence of the Presbyterian Church, people were kind of more given to family life. Celibacy was a challenge for the people, and when
it's always countercultural, but perhaps more so.
Exactly. So when you tell someone you want to go be a priest, they look at you, they are like, so you mean you're not going to get married, you're not going to make children? They kind of see you wasting your useful.
What's wrong with you? What's wrong with you?
And even my dad felt that way. In fact, he didn't want me to be a priest, and he did everything possible, not in a hostile manner, but in terms of the way he wanted me to go, the kind of job he wanted me to, take on, the career he was preparing me for, following up in his footsteps as someone who worked in the banking sector. That was what he wanted me to do, So when I got out of high school and started college, that was what I started, banking and finance. That was the course. But I just felt inadequate. It just didn't sit well. I didn't feel I was doing what I was actually called to do. So I recall one day returning and saying, hey, I'm not doing this anymore. College was just about 15 minutes drive away from home. So I didn't have to be there. I could go, every day. Mm-hmm. And our house was just by the, where you have the taxis, passing by. So
a commuter student of sorts.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. So that was it. So I came back home and, it was hard to break that news. It was really challenging because
Did you have to screw up your courage a little bit?
Exactly. And there was a lot of prayers, my mom we're all tensed. It was a tense evening. My mom, my siblings, no one knew how my dad was going to take it, But somehow God just gave me the courage, and I had to break that news to him. I remember he just watched me intensely. And there were a lot of things going on in my head. I'm like, is he going to give me a hard spank? What is he going to do? But I think I kind of confused him at that moment. He didn't just know what to say. And I recall him making a statement like, well, whatever you want to do with your life is completely up to you. Wherever you want to go do your schooling is completely up to you. And that left
And he wasn't disowning you, but he was... He
was just, I understood where he was coming from. But that statement got me much more confused. I'm like, what does this mean? Does it mean I have lost his, paternal support or, but thankfully he, one thing I do respect him for is though he had that initial struggle, he did not leave me in the cold. He supported me every way, everything I needed for seminary, every financial support I needed, he was there. And 3 years down the road, after I started seminary, I think he came around. God did his work. And he became even much more excited than, So it was much later.
I can identify with this, right in seminary. My dad became the biggest proponent,
So he became my biggest fan. And it was after he passed, God rest his soul, that his brother, my uncle, told me something which I've never forgotten. He said he was one of those who discouraged my dad from allowing me to go to seminary, because he thought I should be back home, being the eldest, to sit back, raise a family. But that there was something my dad told him, which I never knew. He said, my dad told him, leave him alone. God is calling him. That was an amazing statement.
To anoint you in that way.
So that's how my journey started, and 9 years through seminary.
And always diocesan priesthood, not religious life.
Yeah, always diocesan priesthood, And the funny thing, let me say something about that. You have to discern if you want to be diocesan, you want to get into the missionary, or you want to be a religious priest. And in trying to make that discernment, I didn't want to be far from home. I'm just this guy who just wants to be close to home, close to my parents and siblings. Mm-hmm. And I choose to be a diocesan because I'm like, well, the farthest situation for me would be like 1 hour, at most 2 hours drive away. And here am I, miles and thousands of miles away from home.
God's sense of humor, but yeah. And just one last comment about Calabar, the region of the South. That's not a region now afflicted with a lot of conflict. We hear about some of the violence and bloodshed in Nigeria, but is that a more peaceful area, or
good
is
question.
Your family in peril?
Yeah, good question, Bishop. That's where, where you have all of that conflict is way up in the north. We are way down in the south. In fact, Calabar is the south end of Nigeria. Sometimes I kind of relate it to Florida here in the U.S. So beyond us, you have the coastline that leads you all the way into the Atlantic. So we are way south. So all of that is way north. I mean, to travel by road will take you, if you're too fast, will be like 18 hours if you're going by road. By flight would be almost 2 hours flight in the air.
Wow.
So that's way core north, because Nigeria is kind of equally divided between Christians and Muslims. So you have the north, mostly Islam, Muslims, and then south, mostly Christians. And, though you also have pockets of Christians in the north, they are the ones really facing the persecution. Mm-hmm. And you also have pockets of Muslims in the south who are not facing any persecution, interestingly.
Okay. Wonderful. Yeah, to sow that hope that's there. So I look forward someday to being part of, the great priests that Calabar has shared with us, and so to honor your Archbishop and to be present, I look forward to visiting sometime. Oh. But here you are, you ended up, and eventually Omaha for hospital chaplaincy training, what we call clinical pastoral education.
Yeah.
Tell us about that, and was that your initiative, or was it proposed to you, or how that came about?
Yeah, good question. It was proposed. I just got back from a mission engagement in Grenada, that's in the Caribbean, and
so you already kind of had a charism for preaching and missionary.
Exactly.
Okay.
So I got back, and I was just kind of an associate in a parish in the city of Calabar, and 6 months down the road, my bishop called me and said, "Hey, we want to send you to the U.S. and we want you to go do hospital chaplaincy." And that came out of a hospital project that the diocese had started about 8 years ago. While I was still in the Caribbean, they wanted to build that project was there, but they now wanted to expand it to full-fledged healthcare services for folks right in the heart of the city of Calabar. So they felt having CPE training would help, the workforce of that hospital when eventually it takes off. So everything was really strange because my default self thought that hospital ministry was only for priests. But when I came into the U.S., I discovered that even lay people, men and women are called into it. So
predominantly.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that was my, first, I wouldn't call that shock, but I needed to reorient myself quickly to that situation. And then when I came into the Midwest and started the program, it called me to really open myself to a lot of things. And one of the things that I realized was how powerful the ministry of listening and compassion can be, and I realized something which I had to learn, that listening to people is a universal need. It's a human need. People want to be heard. You don't have to agree with them, but people want to be heard. And just sitting there listening to people in an open way, in a non-judgmental way, makes a lot of difference. And that has redefined my exercise of even priestly ministry. When people know that they can tell you whatever they want to tell you, you're not going to judge them, it helps you connect with them in a real way. And that has also helped me to break down a lot of bias in the minds of people, because I've also encountered people who think that as Catholics, we are very, permit me to use the word, maybe proud and arrogant because of our kind of, we belong to the oldest church, first known Christian church and all of that. So they think that we are in a bubble of our own. We don't want to, launch. When I was in Clarinda, a place that is typically and predominantly Lutheran, that really helped me to engage, and some of them were surprised to realize that, as Catholics, we can engage with them, So, and I told them, well, forget about what happened with Luther and the church. Basically, we are of one faith. And interestingly, something that I did appreciate about the Clarinda community is that amongst most of the parishioners, the Catholic parishioners, for most of them, either that you will find a spouse, either of the spouses, one of them being Catholic, the other being Lutheran. Either the man is Lutheran, wife is Catholic, or wife is Catholic, man is Lutheran. And they are able to manage that situation. And, to the point where they have to take turns, one leg in the Lutheran on Saturday and one leg in the Catholic church on Sunday, or vice versa. And at least one or two of them became very committed, members of our Catholic community. And I really cherished that, respected it a lot, and honored that. So listening to people, being there for people, just connecting with our humanity. Let's talk
about, though, Des, and I appreciate this very much, that is something that people remark about you to me with glowing affirmation and appreciation for who you are and your manner of being present. When someone wearing a Roman collar walks into a hospital room, it can evoke trust and it can allow the heart to be open, or it can evoke suspicion or a kind of defense mechanism. What was your most common experience in that regard?
Yeah. Bishop, that's a very good question, and it's real.
I'm trying, man. I'm trying.
It's real. I think first and foremost, openness. Because what I see is the human person. Every other thing is accidental as far as I'm concerned. I've walked into a room, and in fact, once someone told me, as soon as he saw my badge and I introduced myself as a chaplain, I didn't even say Catholic. I just said, the man just told me, if you're here to talk to me about religion, get the hell out of my room. That was shocking. But that almost threw me off balance. But somehow this smile came, and I smiled and I said, well, I'm just here to see how you're doing today. How are you? And that changed the entire conversation. And I spent not less than half an hour in that man's room. We just got talking about everything. I didn't bring in the religious piece. And he was so happy. And I was so fulfilled, because when I was leaving, he gave me a handshake and said, hey, come again when you're around the floor. And so openness and knowing that, well, people have different ideas about who a chaplain is. Even for our Catholic folks, sometimes you show up, they feel that, are you coming to announce their impending death? I got that some days ago, and I'm like, no. I'm just here to see how you're doing, to check up on you, and, how are things going? Just to see how well you're faring. Do you have family support? Is there any way I can minister to your spiritual and sacramental needs? Is there anything I can advocate for you? Because sometimes beyond the spiritual role, chaplains can be a voice for patients, and I have found myself in that role, someone
as a kind of advocate then.
Yeah, exactly. Connecting, being a liaison between the patient and the care team. I once had an experience of a female patient who was having mistrust issues with the care, and that was beginning to create a challenge for the care team. They didn't know how to proceed with the next level of care. And she told me, they are not telling me anything. They just go put me here, so I have to let them know, well, this patient is not kind of trusting this. Just give her information about next steps, and that changed the whole thing.
Very, I would say very diaconal in a sense of being that bridge, right? Yeah. And that's, you're ordained a deacon first before a priest.
Exactly.
So great exercise of that ministry. We're going to take a short break here. We'll have more with Father Sylvester Okoh. He's Catholic Priest Chaplain at UnityPoint Hospitals here in Des Moines, in the newly appointed liaison for the National Association for Catholic Chaplains for the state of Iowa. We'll have more here on the Iowa Catholic Radio Network and the Spirit Catholic Radio Network right after this. Welcome back to Making It Personal with Bishop William Joensen, and we'll continue our conversation with Father Sylvester Okoh, Catholic priest and chaplain at UnityPoint Hospitals.
Thank you for being with us, Father Sylvester.
Thank you,
you
Bishop.
said sometimes your classmates or friends would call you Sly, but we won't be that familiar. But you talk about this kind of receptive listening to people, trying to come in and just engage and be present and regard them as a person. You don't have an agenda or, many possible ways in which your ministry, you rely on lay ministers to bring the Blessed Sacrament, the Eucharist. Is that part of your ministry, or to offer the anointing of the sick, or is that what you would lead with some people, or is that something that evolves in the course of a conversation?
It's all embracing. The issue of allowing EMEs to come into the hospital, I would think that would be like something for the hospital administration to deal with, considering that UnityPoint belongs to a different healthcare system. So
Eucharistic ministers.
Yeah, but if they allow it, fine, we need these folks to complement what we do. And I really do appreciate the availability of a lot of our lay folks who come in, because I think sometimes we are not able to reach everyone. So they really, do something quite amazing. Because of this pacing of the different healthcare sites, we kind of have to run around, and each day is always very
Methodist,
overwhelming.
Lutheran, and Broadlawns.
Yeah, Broadlawns, and then we also have Methodist West, so it's 4 actually. Mm-hmm. So we run around as much as we can, and but it's the Methodist downtown that is the most busiest. So that's where that takes a lot of our energies. The other ones are not that they don't have their traffic, but somehow you can get to cover a lot of grounds. I'm not sure I've been able to cover all I have to cover at the downtown side ever, but we do the much we can. We do as much as we can. Mm-hmm. And with my other colleague, Father Eze and Father Enrique, Father Enrique has been a great resource for the Spanish-speaking folks. So thank God for that.
And the English-speaking, but gifted, but
exactly.
in particular that cares and that is
exactly.
part of that. Your recognition by your peers, I don't know if you ran for office, but now the liaison for National Association for Catholic Chaplains for the state of Iowa. Congratulations on that.
Thank you,
kind
Bishop.
of vote of confidence from your peers.
Yeah.
What does that entail?
I think that's completely...
I think that's another show.
That's completely, away from me. They suggested my name, but basically it's just for me to be a resource person for new and existing NACC members, just to be that connection or nexus between, the folks here and the NACC National Office in Milwaukee. And to be able to, at least if someone comes in as a new chaplain or someone is new in town, I can connect. And so that's basically what it is, and sharing information that is helpful with my chaplain colleagues.
There's a high degree of formation and certification, evaluation that's led you to this point in your ministry, board certified and other things. Now, are you in a role of supervising or mentoring other chaplain candidates?
I wouldn't say supervising, but I can mentor. Supervision would be like in a more in a workspace situation. So I don't have that right now, but I can mentor certainly, and I can interview too. To get people to become board certified. If I want to, that would be me signing up. With the NACC on that. But without the NACC, anyone who approaches me to say, "Hey, I'm trying to get my written stuff in. I'm preparing for board certification." I can play that role of mentorship. And now NACC is even beginning to consider making mentorship a requirement while people are preparing for board certification. Then it was an option, but in recent times they are kind of making it something that each board certification candidate has to consider. And I think that's going to be helpful because I had a mentor. I had about 2 or 3. And they were really very helpful in preparing me for board certification.
Yeah, well, they would be very blessed to have you, and we are blessed to have you in the Diocese of Des Moines.
Thank you, Bishop.
Not just our Catholic flock, but people at all who might cross paths with you and who might be fortunate to have you come. The gentle presence of a shepherd who just simply wants to bind up wounds and release people from their fears. So thank you so much, Father Sylvester.
Thank you so much, Your Excellency. I appreciate it. Thank you, Deacon Mark. Appreciate it all.
This has been another great episode of Making It Personal with Bishop Joensen. I can say that, I think, with the exercise of my mentorship here at Iowa Catholic Radio. But absolutely, thank you for listening today to our guest, Father Sylvester Okoh, from the diocese here in Des Moines, serving as a chaplain at UnityPoint Hospitals, and to our listeners across Iowa, Nebraska, Wisconsin, Minnesota, Missouri, or wherever you are tuning in to the Iowa Catholic Radio Network or the Spirit Catholic Radio Network. We'll be back next week with another edition of Making It Personal with Bishop William Joensen.
You can hear Making It Personal with Bishop William Joensen every week on Iowa Catholic Radio and iowacatholicradio.com.
Support for Iowa Catholic Radio and Making It Personal is provided by Sarah Vocations Ministry. Learn more at joinserra.org.